Hello there to all the viewers, all the participants. We are live now on Tails Shakeup. This is Tomas Estes. I'm going to give you a little introduction to myself. I grew up in Los Angeles on the east side in the Mexican community. It was very early on that I got a passion and a love for Mexico and pretty much all of its cultural expressions. It was later in my life when I was in my teens that I really found an appreciation for tequila that was in the United States, but especially in Baja California, where I very often went to, for instance, Ensenada. Go first of all across the border, San Isidro into Tijuana, then on to Ensenada, where the very, very infamous Husong's Cantina is, which has been there since before really Ensenada was there, before cars. They say that people used to ride donkeys into the bar and sit on them as they were drinking at the bar. So I guess we could say that people would drink until they fell off their ass or something there. That could be a kind of a funny pun. Anyway, I became a school teacher in the Los Angeles area and went to Amsterdam in 1970, 1 year after Woodstock. And as a result of having been there for 3 or 4 months, I realized I would really love to live in Amsterdam, Holland, and thought, now how am I going to be able to do that? How will I support myself? How will I make a living? And I thought, well, I'm not going to find a job. No one will employ me, hire me. But what if I start a business of my own? What would that be? What would be a hole in the market? And I thought, Mexican restaurant bar in Amsterdam, Holland, sometime in the 70s. The idea grabbed a hold of me. I thought I could do it very genuinely and honestly and from my heart with a lot of passion because of my love for Mexico and for its cultural expressions. And by 1976, I succeeded in opening this restaurant in Holland. Having made a success of it there, I decided to move on and see how many other challenges I could take on to learn about myself and to learn about my world. So from Holland, I went on to London and opened a Mexican restaurant there in London in 1982, which is still there, which is Cafe Pacifico on Langley Street. I then opened Cafe Pacifico in Paris in 1984, Cafe Especial in Cologne in 1986, and in 1988, Cafe Pacifico in Milan, Italy. Then in 1998, in Sydney, Australia, Cafe Pacifico. In 1988, I started a new concept, which was La Perla Bar. And basically all these restaurants were representing various aspects of Mexican culture, which I would say would be certainly the food, certainly the bar aspects, highlighting tequila, eventually later on and currently other agave spirits, such as mezcal and notably Raicilla at this time, which is an agave spirit coming out more and more popular with people. So I was showing the various European countries and Australia what were some different aspects of Mexican culture. As I said, food, drink, ambience, music, that sort of thing. Now, somewhere along the line, I realized how important tequila was to that formula of those restaurants that I had. And so I did all I could to find out about tequila. This was pre my use of the internet. So it was back in the, let's say, the mid 80s, mid to later 80s. So I took trips to Mexico to different distilleries and read whatever information was available by the brands, printed, again, because it was pre-internet access, which is, of course, total access now, pretty much. And learned as much as I could. And I was very busy talking to my own bartenders about tequila and what it was, and encouraging them to understand it and be impassioned about it, and talking to clients, or guests, I should say, in our various restaurants in those various countries. Then I started writing articles in trade, notably in trade magazines in London, about tequila. And besides the articles in trade magazines in Europe, I started writing for a magazine called Tequila 100%, which I just happen to have a copy of, which is not being made anymore. This was a Mexican lifestyle magazine, but based around tequila. And as a result of having written extensively for that magazine, in terms of the pen is mightier than the sword, I made an awareness around my name and me as a person that was busy with tequila. And as a result of this, I was invited by Carlos Camarena, who was probably not probably, who was and still is the distiller, the tequilero, the tequila producer that I feel is the best that there is. Carlos, in those days, being known for the brand of Tapatio and Tesoro, Carlos surprised me and flattered me in about 2006 by asking me if I wanted to do a tequila brand together. And I said, wow, Carlos, of course, let's do it. And by the way, as I'm going along here, I would invite anybody to make this interactive, to ask any questions that you might have, so that I've got a program put together, some ideas on what we can deal with, what we can talk about, you listening and me talking and me listening to you and your questions. So please, at any time, I've got a column on my screen here that will receive questions from you. And so please pass anything on if you wish. So Carlos, as a response to Carlos's invitation, I accepted. There was certainly only one response to, do you want to do a tequila brand with me? And that was totally affirmative. Yes, thank you very much. And to design, conceptualize a tequila which would suit me the most, I said to Carlos, let's make a tequila that has the very most agave, agave being the plant, the raw material from which all agave spirits are made, not surprisingly with that name, agave spirits. Agave is the raw material from which tequila is made. And when we make tequila from the agave, it can only be one variety, which is the agave tequilana Weber variety blue. So I said to Carlos, let's make our new tequila as agave-led as we can. Let's make it as strong with the essence of tequila, as strong as we can do. And Carlos right away said, okay, Tomas, I know how we're going to do that. We will do it in the distillation, meaning that with distillation, along the way with creating any tequila, there are so many decisions with and I will go over the process of making tequila. I'll actually go over the process of making tequila Ocho, and perhaps you will be able to see or have questions about that, how complex and how much each step of the way, the decisions that are made along there, how important the hand of the maker, as we can say, the producer, how important his decisions are to the final quality, the final taste, the final experience to the drinker, to the taster. Excuse me. So with Ocho, Carlos said, I know just what we'll do. We will leave a lot of the heads and a lot of the tails in there because that is where the flavor is. I've got a question here, and I'm learning about how to understand this. I've got a question, so I'm going to interrupt here to respect the question, but also to respect the whole process of making this as much for you, those of you that have kindly tuned into this, as valuable, so that we can follow you. So let's see. It is the blue agave found in the valley or highlands of Jalisco, and does the region make a difference in the type of agave produced? This is really a fantastic question. It is one that those that have been paying attention to tequila, probably for the past maybe as far back as 20 years ago, have been becoming aware of. And that would say that, so first of all, the answer is yes, the blue agave is found in the valley and in the highlands. And it was actually, curiously, to me, originated in the valley. That's where this blue agave was indigenous to. And the history says that the blue agave was chosen, and it happened to be in the Tequila Valley, because it was the one that created amongst the people that were drinking it way, way, way back when, before it was even called tequila, that was producing the most palatable, the sweetest, the best drinking agave spirit then, which they called vino de mezcal. So yes, the blue agave is indigenous to that. the history also tells us that at some time in the late 1800s, it was taken to the Highlands. Probably the first production was sometime in the very early 1900s. Exactly who did that is still not really authenticated, but it's certain that it was produced. And what's curious to me is that right now, I understand that there is more agave grown in the Highlands than in the Tequila Valley region, and that a lot of people, most people, would esteem actually the value, market value, as well as the quality of those agaves in order to make tequila as being higher than those of the valley. And very briefly, and I'll probably come back to this in a moment, that up in the valley, up in the Highlands, those agaves struggle more than in the valley. The valley has a richer valley soil, which would grow pretty much any crop better in a fertile sort of setting. The days and nights year round in the valley are warmer, which is more conducive to this plant. So, as is the case of vines that grow grapes, especially those that we're going to use those grapes for wine production, the wine from struggling vines, in a general sense, are going to have more character. And it is believed, though I'm not sure it's proven by any scientists, that this is the case with the agave. So yes, somewhere back in the last probably 20 years, people that were paying attention to tequila were saying, hey, we're finding that the tequilas that are produced from Tequila Valley agaves taste different to the tequilas produced from exclusively Highland agaves. And to me, I would say that as a general rule, the tequilas from the valley are more forward in their flavor, more robust, more masculine, to use a wine term, earthier, more herbal. In contrast, those of the Highlands are more feminine. They would be more fruity, rounder, perhaps sweeter. Again, feminine, to use a wine term. In the past, Don Julio, I would have said, is a very good representative of the Highland, being soft, fruity, round. Still, Don Julio is produced, as far as I've understood from my friends there, exclusively, excuse me, from the only agaves from the Highlands. In contrast, Herradura, which is produced in the valley in Amatitan, used to be exclusively only valley agaves, and it was, for me, and actually still is to a large degree, even though they are sourcing agaves from other locations, including the Highlands, what I'm understanding, and other places, it is still, for me, rather representative of a valley, Tequila Valley, masculine forward tequila. So let me go back to that question. Does the region make a difference in the type of agave produced? The answer is yes, and I've given you a rather involved and yet still brief for me, because I could carry on this for hours, and we really basically have about an hour. So if I'm going to leave that at that for now, and I'm going to go on to the next question. Now, if anybody wants to hear more about that, please put the next question up, another question about how the region makes a difference in the type of agave produced. So then I'm going to go up here to the next question, which is, given the changes in tequila production methods, partially due to demand, but also due to profit motive for multinational companies, do you think it is easier or more difficult for the average consumer to find a good tequila versus when you started? Okay, this is a great question. And it's got a number of parts to it. So let me start with, given the changes in tequila production methods, partially due to demand, but also due to profit motive for multinational companies, do you think it's easier or more? So, first of all, there are changes in production methods. Probably in the last period of time, one of the most dramatic, using the diffuser. Now, the diffuser is a process which is very economical. It gets the most potential out of agaves. So I'm understanding that it's about 98% efficient in getting the juices out of the agave, from which we can then create a sweet product that can be fermented and then distilled. So economically and speed-wise, this is a very efficient method of doing it, as opposed to the very old-fashioned, which is cooking, milling with a tahona, fermenting, then distilling. Which is better? That is certainly up to the consumer. It is up to a person's taste. Sauza notably is, as far as I'm understanding, making all of their products with the diffuser. They're very open about it. They're very transparent, which I appreciate a great deal. And they're doing very well in the market. There's a lot of appreciation on the part of consumers. I would say there's something I forgot to say about my introduction, and that is that partially as having made a certain name for myself with the tequileros in Mexico, I was very kindly recognized by the Mexican National Tequila Chamber as their representative, as their official ambassador. As that representative, I want you to realize that I'm very much aware and conscious of the fact that choices about tequila brands and tequila persons consuming choices is very personal and up to them. So I am speaking as objectively as I can about all of these processes. So back to this question now, given the changes in tequila production methods, which again, I've just spoken of, partially due to demand, but also due to profit motive, do you think it is easier or more difficult? I think it's easier for the average consumer to find a good tequila versus when I started. So when I started in 1976 with my bar in Amsterdam, Holland, there were few brands, there were few choices. So now let's also talk about a major difference in two subcategories of tequila. In order to put this into context, let's say that there is a broad category of agave spirits. Of the agave spirits, we're going to have tequila in one subsection. We're going to have mezcal. We're going to have raicilla, bacanora, tusca, a number of others underneath this subheading of agave spirits. Within the category of tequila, we've got two subcategories. One is regular tequila, and the other is tequila 100%. Now, regular tequila is allowed to have 51% minimum agave sugars. Now, I use that term in quotation marks because, as far as I'm understanding, what comes from the agave is not a sugar in our layman's understanding of sugars. It's not a sucrose, which is right now quite a controversial term, because there are so many ideas about its harmful effects on our body and its addictive ideas and all that, its addictive possibilities. So with regular tequila, we have the possibility of creating a tequila with 51% agave-sourced sweeteners, call them sugars, but understand, please, that they're not our traditional sugars. And then the other 49% usually are sugars, meaning from sugarcane or from corn. Then tequila 100% agave is made from only the agave plant. Which is better amongst those two? That is certainly a matter of taste. With the regular tequila, we're going to have a flavor that perhaps, as a generality, has less of an agave essence to it. Is that better or worse? Again, it's up to the consumer's personal taste. I have found in my bars, so once again, I've had bars and restaurants. Next year, it will be 40 years, so 39 years. And at one time, I think I had probably 6 or 10 bars going at one time. I've got a lot of experience with introducing tequila to the uneducated or unexperienced public. And a lot of times, a regular tequila is a very good one to start people on, because they can be very good quality and they can also be good taste. Right now, there is a trend in the category of tequila for 100%. There's a lot of concentration or attention being given on the part of the producers on this subcategory of tequila. And as a general rule, again, there is going to be more agave flavor in a tequila that is in a 100% agave. Now, Ocho, which I spoke of earlier, I was saying to you, I was sharing with you that it was produced with the idea in mind to express as fully as possible the agave essence. So Ocho is one that has very much of what I would call the tequila flavor. Again, is that better or less better than another tequila? Very personal choice according to the consumer. Now, that was from Scott. Scott, I don't know if now let me go back to this question. Do you think it's easier or more difficult for the average consumer to find a good tequila? I think it's much easier, and the reason being is because there's a lot more out there in the market. There's a much bigger variety of 100%, certainly of 100% agave tequilas on the market. There is more of the regular tequilas on the market. The tequila category is growing in volume and in choice. So I see that as a really good sign. I see that as a good trend for the tequila industry, the tequila culture, and for the consumer. So now I believe I have answered. Excuse me. I believe I've answered that from Scott, and I have a question from Chris Mack, who is a very dear friend, and I'm very pleased to see you that you've tuned into this, Chris. Chris, you've said, would you care to discuss the idea of tequila as medicine? I would love to talk about this, and thank you for bringing it up. This is something that is, first of all, very unproven, still unproven. I'm going to go over a few of the possibilities whereby tequila, and Chris, what I'm going to choose to do is put not only tequila in this answer to your question, but I'm going to add all agave spirits in this. Why? Because I think the medicinal possibilities come from the plant itself, the agave. So just to step back, the blue agave is one of 200 or 300, I'm not sure how many species within this family of agave. It's one of many, 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 many that exist in Mexico. It's one of many from which producers of varying sizes make a spirit from. And there are a lot of producers that we know about that are bringing their products to the market in the mezcal culture. So let's include all of those in that. And let's say that it's the plant itself, after it has been cooked, so the starches have been converted to sweet elements, not sugars, but elements that can be fermented through the fermentation, through the distillation. These very special and still mysterious elements of the agave remain in the distillate. And let's think about this plant being a real product of the combination of Mother Earth. This plant has been with its roots in the mother for, let's say, around 8 years. Some agaves, I've drank some raicillas, which is an agave spirit, used to be in the category of mezcal, but now it has its own name control. So I speak of it separately to mezcal. I drank a raicilla at one of my favorite bars in the world, which is Pare de Sufrir, Bebe Mezcal. Stop suffering, to translate it, stop suffering, drink mezcal. I've drank a raicilla from there, which the plants were 31 years old. So just think, they're sitting in the nutrients of the mother and absorbing all the energy of the sun, the father sky, and all of those elements are accumulating in this plant. Now, when it's harvested, the whole plant is taken. It's not like taking a peach off a tree or a orange off a tree or an apricot. The plant is done at that time. So all of those elements of the earth and the energy of the sun are embodied in that plant. Now, I imagine myself, the sun energy being in there and being a part, and this is all part of the taste construction or the taste creation. It's also part of the inebriating effect, how we feel from it. Now, there are two health-related or well-being related companies, brands that I know of in fashion right now. One is Cross Training, and I remember seeing in the Cross Training's information about them that if one were to want to drink the healthiest alcohol of any type, not just distillate, but wines or beers, that tequila or an agave spirit would be the best. I believe they thought of that because there's no wheat in it, is it glucose that's in there, or no, and that I can't remember which thing that wheat has. But because of the raw material, it was bringing a very healthy, friendly absorption or metabolism to the body. The other one, which is in fashion, being CrossFit. So the first one was paleo diet. The second one, CrossFit, or I'm not sure which one I said first. But those two, both, my understanding is from having read their websites some time ago, is that the agave spirit, specifically by them, tequila, is the healthiest thing, according to them, to drink for our body's well-being, our body's health. Now, my barber, Miguel Diaz, believes that his cholesterol is greatly aided because he puts a couple of milliliters of tequila each day in his coffee. And he said, Tomas, I can show you on my medical records that my cholesterol is going down. I can show you at the VA. And I said, well, Miguel, of course, I'm very pleased that your cholesterol is going down, but whether it's going down because of the tequila that you're using or not is not medically or scientifically proven. But there still is that belief that it aids in cholesterol removal or diminishing it. What are the other things? There's right now been some information, literature out there that because of the absorption of agave spirits, it could aid in slimming or weight reduction. So those are some of the things that come to mind. Chris, if you can think of more that you can help me with, because you're in some ways smarter than me about various things, and if you can help me and come back on that, I would be grateful. And if any of you that are out there that have more ideas or more resources for me on the health aspects, or the medicinal, let's call it, as Chris brought up, aspects of agave spirits or tequilas, please bring them up. Now, let me see, Chris, I hope I've done, your question a good answer. Now, excuse me, I'm reading another question. Is high fructose corn syrup a common adjunct in a regular tequila? Great question. Any regulation on what can or can't be used in production? Great. Thank you, Adam, for that question. Honestly, I do not know if it's high fructose corn syrup. I do know that what is very commonly used is sugar. Usually what I have seen personally firsthand is not highly refined sugar granules from cane sugar. Now, why would that be the raw material that we would use for a regular tequila? Because it's available in Mexico, and it's available rather inexpensively. Now, in all fairness to this discussion, there have been times when the price of cane granulated, meaning dried, cane sugar has been more costly in the Mexican market to the tequileros, to the tequila producers, than agave. So the agave tends to fluctuate greatly over a 10-year period, and I'm not going to go into that because I'm going to stick to my questions as best I can. But there's a whole dynamic on why the agave prices vary so highly. Basically, it's because it takes so damn long to grow the agave. Let's say again 8 years. So back to this question from Adam. Usually it's cane sugar, and what happens is, let's put this into its right context, please. Give me a moment to give you this. Usually we'll take the granulated sugar, we'll mix it with warm or hot water and create a syrup out of it. That will be mixed with the agave sugars, again, in quotation marks, at the point of fermentation, okay? So they're going to be fermented together, they're going to be distilled together. So they actually make a distillate, which is very much a combination of those two sugar sources. I do know that corn sugar is used, but I do not know if it's high fructose or not. So please excuse me for that. If it's an important question, Adam, I can ask my sources, the people in the industry, for further information on this. Now, any regulation on what can or can't be used in production, yes, it can be sugars sourced from any basic material except other types of agave. It cannot come from any one of those other sources besides the blue agave, one of those other agave sources. So that's pretty much the only qualification on other sugars. So I hope I have answered that. And it looks like I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to, let's see, is the Valley? Oh, okay. So I do see some more questions. Please excuse me. I'm learning how this works. Now I see, and thank you very, very much for these questions. Again, I could carry on for days, and we have done that in the past. We once had a show on the island, the private island of the Ricard family of the Pernod Ricard company. We had a 3-day, 4-night show there covering all aspects of tequila, drinking included, so you can imagine what effect that had. And we never really finished the subject. So these questions are very well appreciated. The next one that I see here is, do you see the production of agave nectar or syrup as detrimental to the agave spirits industry in the sense of limiting the overall supply of agaves? Well, that's really a great question. It certainly will have a number of effects. As Rob has said, in the sense of limiting the overall supply of agaves. Now, what I have found is that there is a preference amongst agave nectar syrups producers to choose the blue agave, and perhaps it is because it has more latent sugars. Again, remember, they're not sucrose sugars, or because it creates a sweeter product. This is something I'm not sure about, but it definitely has an effect on the demand, on the supply side, which will have an effect on the market value when the demand side links up with the supply side. So if we are taking healthy, good blue agaves away from the supply available to tequileros, yes, it will definitely have a limiting on the overall supply of agaves, and what that would do would tend to drive the price up, demand and supply. Right now, we are going from 2-3 years ago, a price of agave that was so low. It was below 1 peso a kilo. It was so low that the agave producers, the agave growers, could not pay their teams, they could not pay the labor of their jimadores, their harvesters, to harvest a kilo of agave because they couldn't sell it for that same amount. So we found agaves just being left in the field, rotting. Once an agave is ready to be harvested, its optimal time, we're going to have about 6 months window for which, if we don't harvest that agave, it will rot in the field. It will turn back to basically compost or soil. So it's a crazy business being an agave producer. Right now, the latest that I heard from Carlos Camarena and his brother Felipe Camarena, the price was about 650 or 750 pesos a kilo, and rising a little bit and a little bit. Why would that be? Because the supply, instead of being a glut, there's more and more a dearth or a scarcity, and either the supply is constant or the supply is going up. And I believe the sales of tequila are going up worldwide. So that would say to us that the demand is going up. Now let me see, and let me check and see if I feel like I've answered Rob's question. Do you see the production of agave nectar as different? So yes, certainly it will limit the overall supply of agaves, and it will tend to make agaves more dear, and which will also, now let me hopefully finish this conversation with the comment that what we are finding is, because there's this radical change in the raw material price, producers are, I almost said have to, I mean, basically they have to, or let's just say they are passing that cost on to the consumer, or the next consumer, brand owners or distributors or importers. And that is trickling out through the chain into consumers. It's just like, I remember some years ago, I was building a house out of steel. The constructor, the builder was saying steel prices are going up because China is having to pay more for their raw material, and so prices are going up. So it's a market function. So Rob, thank you for that question. Now I've got another one here, which is, how do you feel about aged tequila and mezcals and the prestige attached? Okay, great question, fantastic. Tequila and mezcal being a spirit, they are playing, remember I said these categories, all agave spirits, yes, excuse me. Hey, Rob.
Sorry to bother you.
No problem. This is one of my sons, Rob. Be real brief because we're online.
So mom's just going to take me to work.
Okay, cool. Real good.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Max. Remember that within the category of all agave spirits, that plays within the category of all spirits. So within that broader category, we've got generations and generations of consumers, people that are buyers and appreciate cognacs, armagnacs, whiskeys, all of which pretty much have been aged. Rums, brandies, lots and lots of history of relating or associating a dark spirit with quality, higher quality, and a higher price. Certainly, an aged product justifies a higher price. Let's say a 30-year-old Scotch. Certainly, whoever has produced that 30 years before it got in the bottle has had a big investment tied up in that. So the tradition, the heritage is a brown product, and an aged product is going to be worth more and better drinking. I think there's a real question here with tequila and mezcal about, so certainly in the field of those people that associate their scotches, their cognacs, their old rums with quality, yes, there will be a prestige attached to that. There's a lot of people that I've talked to and listened to, certainly in the mezcal culture, which say mezcal is such a special flavor on its own with absolutely no aging whatsoever, directly out of the still, that we do not want to cover up any of that flavor profile with any wood whatsoever. Back to the tequila culture, that is very much my and Carlos Camarena that is both of our belief with Tequila Ocho. Tequila Ocho being a tequila which has been conceived, designed, created to be the massive agave flavors coming through. We did not want and do not want to cover that up with a deeply charred, fresh new barrel, whether American oak or French oak. So we use the minimum aging, 6 months for a repo, etc., etc., and the most naturalized, fatigued barrels that Carlos has at his disposal. Now, so our product tends to be very pale, has very little color, and it tends to allow those notes of agave to come through. So now, sorry, this is from Stephen. I didn't go further into your question. Stephen says, I prefer Blancos BC to me. I don't know what that means. I prefer Blancos to me, Reposados and Añejos master best flavors. You're a perfect example of what I would say is a new generation of mezcal drinkers, tequila drinkers, who say, look, in fact, actually, Stephen, I don't know if this is your experience, but having been, again, a barkeeper for all these years, I very often introduce somebody, again, like let's say to a Don Julio. Maybe I'll say, you don't like tequila? Just try the smell of this Don Julio Reposado. Why a Reposado? Because it's been softened even more by the oxygen during, let's say, Don Julio's 8-9 months in the barrel. And it's going to be a little less lively, fresh. It's going to be softer and rounder. So I may start people off with a reposado. And what people very often say to me is, yeah, I love tequila. I started somewhere, might be extra añejo, it might be añejo, it might be reposado. But because I love the agave essence, I've gone back to the plata or the blanco, the unaged, because that's what suits me best. And I'm looking at your question again. I like, let's see, I prefer blancos over reposados and añejos because they mask the flavors. You're representative of a growing consumer, I think. That's certainly been my example, my case too. I like the idea of the age being in the agave plant rather than the barrel. Fantastic. Joseph, Stephen, what we do at Tequila Ocho is we only harvest the overripe agaves. Why? Because there's going to be more residual sugars there, and there's going to be more acidity. And therefore, we find that there's much more flavor profiles that are going to come out through that. And now I see, but whiskey mindset pervades perception. Yes. Well, whiskey mindset certainly does pervade perception because whiskey has been in the market as a popular item, a volume item, longer than agave in the mass market, the volume market. And whiskey, I once heard Tom Bullitt say at Tales of the Cocktail, and this is the Tales of the Cocktail activity, so I was very pleased to be at Tales that year as I am every single year. And by the way, there's a couple of agave-centric activities at Tales this year. Those of you that are interested in agave, please go and visit it. I'm going to be involved with Yvonne, and I can't resist plugging this. I'm going to be involved with a man that I love and admire a great deal. That's Iban Saldana. And he actually, if you can believe this, he's Dr. Iban Saldana. He's got a doctorate degree in the agave, and I believe it is even in the blue agave. And he's going to be speaking for an hour or more. I'm not sure exactly how much. And he's very kindly asked me to join him, so I'll be his moderator. So those of you that this has an appeal to, please come to Tales, enjoy yourself. It is an experience that is just nothing like it in the world. And I'm going next to a bar show in Portugal. I've been to bar shows all over the world, and Tales is just without any kind of parallel there's nothing to compare it with. So let me see. I heard once from Tom Bullitt of Bullitt Rye. He said all of their flavor comes from their barrel. And I said, Tom, please tell me, did I hear that right? He said, yes. So whiskey really relies on its barrel aging. Tequila can, but it doesn't in its purest form. So, wow, I've got so many great questions here. Thank you for that question. Now, great. Here's a question from Adam. What do you see as the next big trend in tequila and mezcal? I love to try to see what is the next trend and be there myself. So I have a great interest in this. I believe, Adam, that tequila will continue to be the next big trend in the people that are outside of trendsetters or early adapters, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the big trend in tequila will continue. The next trend after tequila has been mezcal, and I believe that will continue as well. And I believe there's a couple of reasons why mezcal has been trending, and I think one of them is that mezcal is the next thing after tequila. The other thing, the other fashion of it is that there are many examples of mezcals that are great examples of the slow food movement. What is the slow food movement? That means that it cares about diversity. It cares about caring about the provenance of the raw materials for the things, making things slowly, i.e. slow food. It cares about making them in a craft, artisanal, slow batch way with pride and love and care. There is a big trend in our lives towards that with cheese, yogurt, teas, coffees, marijuana, excuse that. Well, those in Colorado are fine with that. Beers, big regional small batch beer growth right now, craft beers, wines, and spirits. So mezcal has been a great poster child for the slow food movement, which is all those things, embodies all those things I just said. Now, what's going to be beyond mezcal? I see raicilla as the next thing beyond mezcal. Now, for about 20 years, Ron Cooper, and I've said that I love Iban Saldana and Chris Mack. He's another person I love and admire and respect a great deal. Ron has been what we'd call in France a negociant. He's a man that doesn't really produce his mezcals, although I know Ron gets involved with the ideas of the raw materials, the plants, which ones, how they're grown, how they're harvested, and how they're produced by his various producers. But Ron has been busy with bringing those to market for about 20 years. Now, there's a lot of other people that have emulated Ron and come into the market, people that I also love and know personally, and are bringing excellent product to market. Not only Ron's Del Maguey, and there's been a great tribute to Ron and his Vida, which is a bartender's mezcal. Gosh, I can't help but plug here, which was recognized by Drinks International by their 50 best bars in the world as their most outstanding product. So back to raicilla. Raicilla is now being brought to market by other negociants, notably one that is another person that I respect a great deal and love, Esteban Morales. And his product is Venenosa. And I believe it's on its way to the US. I know it's on its way to the UK, where most of my commercial activity is, in London and Europe. Raicilla is a kind of agave spirit. Used to be, we could call it a mezcal before mezcal had its own name control. And I think raicilla is getting its own name control. I think they're in the process of looking to do that. And that to me is where the trend will go, to new expressions of raicilla that we're finding brought to the market by negociants like Esteban Morales. There's some others which are called Tusca. David Suro, another very dear friend of another person I love and respect a great deal. David is out there in the market looking for new products as a negociant to bring those out. Bacanoras, again, other agave spirits. And there are some out there that haven't even been discovered because they're so obscure. Now, this is creating all kinds of new dynamics in the market, because when they come to market and they are marketed and people love them, the demand goes up. it doesn't necessarily mean that the supply of the raw material can go up easily, because remember, some of those raceas that the plants of that one racea that I spoke of at Pare de Sufrir, those took 31 years to grow. So if you find, oh, hey, we want to have a bigger supply of those plants, we can be very busy planting them, yet it's going to take, maybe in that case, 31 years to grow. Plus, a lot of those plants are wild, meaning in order to get them, you have to go out and look for them like wild mushrooms or any other kind of wild product. And once, as wild products, wild grown products, as opposed to cultivated products, there's a really definite, severe limit to those. So we don't know how available these are going to be on a longer term, depending on if the demand for these continues at the rate that they are. So I've digressed quite a bit, which is usual for me. Let me look back at Adam's question. Oh, where am I with this? How do I see the next big trend in tequila and mezcal? So I hope I believe it will continue to be more and more discoveries of other, as yet unknown to the market, world market, or even Mexican market, agave spirits. Okay, so I've got that one. Maybe I've answered. Oh, here's one from Scott. Do you think Carlos would produce a 100% Tahona brand or sub brand? Well, Scott, this is an answer that Carlos already produces and has produced a 100% Tahona brand, which has been on the US market, I believe, since the late 80s, early 90s, which is called Tesoro. Now, at first, Tesoro brand was owned by Carlos Camarena and Bob Denton. Bob Denton being the man who first started Chinaco in the United States in 1983. So Carlos still produces that. Right now, the brand ownership is owned by Suntory, which bought Beam, which owned Tesoro. So the answer to that question is yes, Carlos already produces a 100% Tahona brand, which is called Tesoro. Now, let's talk about a sub-brand. Carlos's brother-in-law, another man who I love very much and respect and admire, as far as I know, the only other ambassador from the Mexican National Tequila Chamber, Julio Bermejo, who runs his family business in San Francisco called Tommy's. Julio is the namesake of the Tommy's Margarita because either Julio was the one that truly originated it, or if somebody else may have originated it, it's really Julio who popularized it. So it's named in honor of Julio's family's restaurant, quite correctly so. Now, Julio is Carlos's brother-in-law because Julio married Carlos's sister, Liliana Camarena. And Julio is bringing to market a tequila called L&J for Lily and Julio tequila. And so Julio has made, I think, two different productions. I'm sure he has some at his bar, his family bar in San Francisco, out on Geary. I think it's 5900 or something. It's out there by 23rd Avenue or Street. Anyway, you can look up Julio, or look up Tommy's Mexican restaurant on Geary, and you'll find it. So that the L&J is made 100% Tohono. It's one of the few, along with Tesoro, that is 100%. And other than that, that's all I know about that, Scott. And I see here another question. Let me see. Earlier you this is from Chris. Earlier you stated that you wanted to maximize the agave flavor by retaining much of the heads and tails in the distillation. Do you do this for both the Blanco and aged versions, or is that too harsh for the Blanco? Ah, great question. Thank you very much for that, Chris. For all of Ocho, they are all produced exactly the same in an artisanal way. So they're all, first of all, if I'm going to give a little attention to this, I'll back up. With Ocho, not only have we wanted to make it very, very agave-led, but we have played with this idea of, oh, there's a certain taste profile from agave produced, from agaves grown only in the Tequila Valley, made into tequila in the Valley. Those are different to agaves grown only in the Highlands and produced in the Highlands. So what we wanted to do with Ocho is say, look, if there is a difference in the flavor profile of Tequila Valley tequilas and Highland tequilas, can we then produce a single vineyard, to use tequila wine terms? Can we produce a single rancho, a single estate, a single plot of land, one particular plot of land where those agaves only come from that? Not only do they come from the Highlands, not only do they come from this so-called Golden Triangle, which is meant to be the premier cru, the grand cru. If the Highlands are the premier cru, there's a grand cru being considered between Arandas, Jesus Maria, and Atotonilco. So if we consider that that is the best place to grow agaves, then we say, well, look, what about single ranch production? We've actually done that with Ocho. And right now we have 12 different ranches, and you can find the different ranches online from different sellers, SELLERS or CELLARS. And that's a whole nother discussion, but we have found out of the 12 production of those different single ranches, single estates, single vineyards, that they all do taste different, which would tend to tell us that definitely there is terroir in that aspect. So the question is, we take all of our agaves as ripe as we can out of single vineyard, of single ranch. We take them to the factory, we cook them the same very low temperature for the same amount of time, cool them off the same. We mill them or squeeze them in the same process. We use the same source. It's a spring that comes out right there at the distillery. We use the same water, very mineral rich. We use the same fermentation process, the same basic yeast culture. Although the yeast contain the fermentation tanks are open to the air, so that the air brings in all sorts of airborne yeasts and bacterias, and let's call them germs. but that all mixes in. Then the distillation is done in the same stills. So the first and second distillations, same stills, same low temperature, same heads and tails cuts. So that every batch from every ranch is the same. And then we take whatever is in there out of that general production and age it in different ways. Well, age it in the oldest barrels we can find, then take it out for repo at 6 months, añejo at 1 year, et cetera, et cetera. So the answer to that question is, it is not too harsh for the Blanco for a person that appreciates and enjoys the tequila experience. So there's that question and answer. Scott, here's another one from you. Thanks again. Given the changes in, oh no, wait. Oh no, no. I've answered Scott's. I've answered that one. I've answered that. I believe. So I think I've answered all the questions, and I believe we've gone a quarter of an hour over the traditional time period. Does anybody have any other question or comment to come up? I'm going to make a really quick appeal to you all, and that is, in my bars, we have gone from using the traditional caballito shot glass, which is a wonderful, fun thing and very filled with heritage for Mexican culture. This has been the way to drink tequila in the past. What it does is it doesn't do much to flatter the tequila as it does in a glass like this, which is an ISO tasting glass. This is another glass. Phil Bailey, who ran Cafe Pacifico in Australia with me for 18 years, fancies a glass like this. David Suro, who I mentioned, who's had a Mexican restaurant in Philadelphia for over 25 years, I think close to 30 now, serves his Tequila Valley tequilas in a glass like this, his other Highland tequilas in a more champagne flute. Now, why do I want to talk to you about this is because the way that this is designed gives us the best tasting experience. This is not tequila, by the way, but I'm thirsty. Excuse me, please. Tequila poured into a glass like this would open the fumes, the gases, the congeners, the flavor elements, and then redirect it back into a better focus. So if you've got a tequila that you want to enjoy, or if you are a bar owner, or you're the one that's making decisions about how your bar is going to, you're a bar owner, you're a bartender, if you're making decisions about how you're going to serve your pours, I would strongly suggest that you're going to give your consumer, and including yourself, a better experience taste-wise because of the proper glass. Now, there's another element that's probably equally as important, and that is the psychological effect. In my places, if I serve a pour like this, my guest, my consumer is going to think, oh, I'm going to shoot that. Now, it's proven that if we shoot the liquid, anything, but in this case tequila, it's going to hit the back of the tongue which is where the receptors, we miss a lot of the receptors. We miss the sweet, the salty, the sour ones. The ones back there are, I can't remember what they're called. They're the rougher ones. So this gives a different psychology when we're serving it either to guests, and it says, oh, don't shoot it, sip and savor it. And I would say there are so many tequilas out there on the market, and mezcals, and the other agave spirits that really deserve our respect and attention and our time in tasting them properly, sipping and savoring them, to give us and anybody with us the best example, the best experience from what these people that have put their heart and soul into bringing you this product, these tequilas, mezcals, raicillas, and other agave spirits. So I thank all of you very, very much for bearing with my long-winded answers on these questions. Thank you for having taken your time to tune in to this. Thanks to those of you that shared your questions with us. And thanks for, beyond your interest in agave spirits, for your continuing to give your focus to them and to buying them, whether it's a portion in a bar or restaurant around where you are or where you go, and to buying them in a off-license, a liquor store, and enjoying them wherever you are with your friends. Thanks very much, and come and see us at Tales. It'll really pay off to you, I believe, for a lot of fun, a lot of education, and hopefully a lot of stimulation. Thanks again. Good day to all of you. Signing off.